All right, so we are live. We are live. All right, so we are back with another episode of Small Business Saturday podcast, and I have America's best, one of the top attorneys in America in our regions, doing our thing. One of the top black attorneys doing our thing, and we have another great episode for our listeners on today. So my name is Attorney Justin Camper. I'm a small business, trademark, real estate, criminal defense attorney, and I'm located here in Northwest Indiana. And I have some very distinguished guests who we're going to be talking about a lot of good business tips. And we are doing it on Christmas Eve. So, Merry Christmas to everybody who's watching. So, I'm going to start and let these distinguished gentlemen introduce themselves. Go ahead, Jacoby. You want to start it off?
Hello, my name is Attorney Jacoby Whitley. I'm licensed in the District of Columbia. I practice real estate law, small business law. I do some immigration work as well, and estate planning. So if you have an issue in one of those arenas, please feel free to give my office a call. We will be happy to assist you. And I am happy to be here on this panel, and I was glad to be invited. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to all.
All right. Very festive. All right, Attorney Bunza, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning and happy holidays to everyone. I am Attorney Banza here in the greater Chicago area, licensed in the state of Illinois. It's a good thing to be here, and I'm thankful for that, and look forward to a good conversation.
Awesome. Glad to have you here, Attorney Bonza. I love the background, by the way. Very beautiful tree.
Trying to set the mood,
Okay.
bring the spirit.
Okay. You guys did a great job. Attorney Claus.
Man, I appreciate you. Attorney Shannon Buari. I am an attorney here in the state of Indiana. I practice in basically everything civil, no criminal work, but love the business space, love the small business space, the general counsel space, the estate planning space, the business succession planning step space, and I do a little lit here and there. And Santa Claus today because at some point I got to come down the chimney and bring my kids gifts.
All right, man. Thanks for being here, Attorney Buari. Do you have a Black Watches special going on?
I do. Since it'll be observed Monday until Tuesday, all watches are buy one get one free, equal or lesser value. Buy one get one free. www.blackwatches.com. Spelled just the way it is on the mug, baby.
That's right. Yes. If you want to get you a watch, look like a distinguished gentleman with an attorney watch from a black-owned watch company, go support Black Watches, and definitely get you a watch. You got a special going on right now. I want to get one free. So
get a well-crafted timepiece for your dime piece this holiday season.
Man, he just spitting bars.
I love it.
So today, it's Christmas Eve, and we, like I said, I love getting recommendations from the audience on what we should talk about, and so I actually this is a topic that was recommended to us to talk about Kanye, which or formerly known as Kanye is Ye now, and we were it's a lot going on with Ye, and I think the biggest thing that's going on is the business deal between him and Addias, and so there's no real format today. I'm actually going to just break down for the audience what happened and the deal, and then we can we're going to give our thoughts and our reactions, and we're going to see the conversation goes. But hopefully, by the end of this, you as a small business owner will be able to walk away with some very valuable lessons that you can learn from Ye and Addias, and how to move forward to make sure that you protect and grow your business. So we're going to talk about it. So Ye on Twitter made a statement saying that he was going to go DEFCON 3 on Jews, which caused a lot of spark. Well, actually, before that, he, I believe it was before that, he went to a fashion show, and he had on a shirt that said "White Lives Matter," which sparked out a controversy, and somehow or another, uh, Ye ended up, you know, making this comment on Twitter. Chase Bank uh, dropped all of his, dropped him and said, "Hey, you gotta get your money out of our bank." And eventually, his big partnership deal with Addias had ended, and I believe they made a statement. Uh, Let me see if I can find that statement here. But eventually, so the deal with Addias was that it was basically a standard licensing deal that was basically labeled as a collaboration. And what this licensing deal meant was that Kanye licensed to Adidas his trademarks and intellectual property to put on shoes and apparel. So Adidas was the one who was doing the manufacturing and the designing, and that's why Adidas ended up actually getting design patents because they did the actual design, but Ye is the one who had basically the idea, and basically Adidas was just a manufacturer and selling it, and it was a very 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 successful partnership, which was a part of the reason why Ye was a billionaire because of it. Uh, and so it was a very, very successful collaboration and licensing agreement between him and Adidas. And some people say that Ye did this on purpose. And some people say, it wasn't on purpose, that, it just Ye just crazy. But I know that, Ye wanted to do, um, certain things, and his contract didn't allow him. And I know that, Adidas was making so much money, billions of dollars off of him, millions of dollars off of him, that it was hard for this relationship to end, and Adidas just finally terminated the partnership. So I'm going to read the statement from Adidas. It says, Adidas does not tolerate anti-Semitism and any sort of hate speech. Ye's recent comments and actions have been unacceptable, hateful, and dangerous, and they violate the company's values of diversity and inclusion, mutual respect, and fairness. After a thorough review, the company has taken the decision to terminate the partnership with Ye immediately in production of Yeezy branded products and stop all payments to Ye. Sorry. In his comments, Adidas will stop the Adidas Yeezy business with immediate effect. This is expected to have a short-term negative impact of up to 250 million on the company's net income in 2022, given the high seasonality of the fourth quarter. Adidas is the sole owner of all design rights to existing products as well as previous new color ways under the partnership, and more of the company's Q3 earnings announcement in November. Okay, so that's what they said. It ended the partnership, and which basically caused a storm of a lot of good legal topics for us to talk about. So, uh, the licensing agreement, trademarks, um, design patents. So it's just a lot here. But I want to throw it to my distinguished panel. What are your initial thoughts about, your initial reaction about the termination of this partnership?
I'll kick it off. So I think that this was foreseeable that they would find grounds to terminate the contract and suffer whatever economic losses that would come from that and find a way to pivot. I believe there's as far as the designs, Adidas can actually owns the patent to some of the designs, so they can still put out that model of shoe. It just won't say Yeezy on it. It's clearly going to say Adidas. And if that design is still a hit in the market, I could see some classic Yeezy purist maybe not wanting to participate. But if the design still hits, they still maybe be able to recoup some of the funds from the contract. But from a ethical standpoint and how the brand looked forward facing to the consumer, it had to be done. And also, there might have been some more pressure put on the company as well to terminate. It could have been political pressure. It could have been social pressure outside of just what Kanye did in his statements alone. So there could have been some outside things that helped lead to this decision and why they were able to just say, look, we'll just eat whatever economic losses that will come from this, but long term, this is best for the company. Kind of similar to the business judgment rule, what's best for the company.
Now, I do see that we have people watching. So if you are a business owner or you just love watching the show, please just chime in. We want to shout you out. And if you have any questions, let us know. Now, Attorney Willie, you actually own a clothing line, correct?
I used to. Well, I do, but I don't. I'm not really active with it right now. Okay. But yes, I do have a history in the fashion industry. I have worked in clothing stores, managed clothing stores. I have purchased from the Magic Trade Show. I've been to the Magic Trade Show several times. I participated in online retail, drop shipping, brick and mortar sales. So yeah, I've been around the block a few times in fashion, but I don't actively have a brand now.
Okay, so just by you having a brand, I mean, how do you feel about this? Where you collaborate with someone and you made a personal comment, outside of you guys deal. It was just on a public platform. I mean, how do you feel about this? Just by being a brand owner in this space, how do you feel about that?
I mean, that's just something that you have to be aware of. And so if I'm a small person and I need to link up with the bigger brand for distribution, most likely, and they use their brand for more brand recognition, more saturation into the marketplace. Being a small guy, I have to be aware of what that major companies, their policy and guidelines are to professional conduct, behavior outside of the contract, how you are perceived. Kind of like Disney, right? If you enter a contract with Disney, there are some personal behavior clauses that come with that dictate how you move outside that movie set or that Disney property. So I think you are aware of that going in when you make these deals. And on the other end, if I'm a major company and I know that a lot of artists sometimes can push the envelope with things, I want to talk and have my conversation with the artist to make sure that they don't do anything that jeopardizes the larger brand as well. So I just think that, that's something that you have to be cognizant of when you go into this relationship. And there's always that risk that someone will say something that would damage the partnership.
Okay, so I'm going to get to some comments. So James Camper says, when you look at it from a business perspective, you have to protect the image of the company because it can create loss for the company. It could have been a threat to the company. So Mary Camper, it says Mary Camper. So maybe Mary. So, but thank you, James and Mary. I appreciate you commenting. Dwayne Camper says, interesting how business is affected when the business head is black versus white. The behavior threshold is way lower for the toleration of blacks versus white. Agree? Question mark. Hey, thanks for that question. I'm definitely going to throw it back to you, distinguished guests. And then one more comment from James and Mary says a personal image always have an impact on the services they provide or the things they sell, especially when they have that type of frame. Okay, great. So, um, what I want to talk about, I'm gonna throw it to Shannon. So, you mentioned as an artist, as someone who designs, who has a brand, who had a clothing line. You mentioned that when you partner with the manufacturer, you have to be aware that you may violate some code or conduct or whatever that you may do. Well, I don't see that Adidas cited any contract or any clause that he violated. They just said that his actions have been unacceptable, hateful, and dangerous, and violate the company's values of diversity and inclusion. Now, I mean, to me, that's bound for interpretation. And he made one tweet. I mean, at the time, right? It was one tweet in a podcast. So I don't know how his actions could have, you know, I mean, do you think his actions truly arose to the level of what they consider uh, unacceptable, hateful, dangerous, against the company's values and diversity? Another thing is too, the reason why you mentioned that they own the design, right? They can create another design and just don't call it Yeezys, they just call it something else. Well, you cannot deny the fact that a lot of people wore Yeezys because it came from Ye, right? And it was his personality and who he was and how he draw attention. That's why the Yeezy brand blew up and it helped them and they were profiting from it. And now because some people may see it as a bad image to connect yourself to someone like Ye, now all of a sudden, oh, you want to change ship, but that's the exact reason why you got with him and why you made so much money with him. So why is it now that you get to just change course because you feel like it, right? Because it doesn't look good, quote and unquote. So my question, back to, oh yeah, and if they own a name in perpetuity, he's host. I don't believe. I don't know. I didn't see that he owned that. They own the name. But so I want to throw it back to Attorney Claus, Shannon Claus. So I mean, what are your initial thoughts on all this?
So I think while the agreement might not have stated specifically what Ye could or could not do, could or could not say, usually licensing agreements between companies have non-disparagement clauses, and that's where you cannot, as the person, do anything adverse, say anything adverse, act adverse to those values of the company, right? So it might not spell it out directly, but if we're in this particular agreement, I can't make remarks that will put this company in a bad light, right? And I think in a roundabout way, he did that, right? I think by making the comments he made, people are going to come back not on Kanye the artist, right? They're going to come back on all of his endorsers and say, "Wow, look, that's crazy that an individual can make a statement like this, and you all stand behind him or her." Which is why you saw Addias, Balenciaga. I mean, they all just started dropping him because they don't want to be associated with that type of rhetoric, right? But I do think contracts do give ways for companies to get out. Uh, and I don't like the word breach, but to sever that, if you will, that relationship with the client simply because, and the ones I do for businesses, I represent, part of my practice is the NIL space. So I read contracts and review contracts for some of the players at Notre Dame and other universities that these companies want to do business with. And it basically says in there, you cannot make disparaging remarks about the company or highly politicized events going on in the nation right now because you could jeopardize losing that quote unquote endorsement, right? So even though Justin is the face of Burger King, if you go out here and make a disparaging remark, a comment that the company doesn't agree with, they can sever that relationship. And I think that's what happened to Kanye West or Ye. But Kobe mentioned something a little earlier that Adidas may still be able to sell the shoe without the Yeezy. I think it was the Yeezy that sold the shoe, right? I don't think it was Adidas that sold the Yeezy, right? So, and this is the way I think of it. If you pull the Jumpman logo off the Jumpman, the Jordan, nobody buys it, right? They buy it because of the Jumpman logo. So I don't know if Adidas can still profit off the design itself with folk understanding that this was, the artist formerly known as Yeezy, right? The shoe formerly known as Yeezy. Because I doubt people stand in line just to buy a pair of cool grays if there is no mention of Michael Jordan on the shoe. At that point, nobody can tell that they're Jordans, right? That's the reason you buy them, is for the Jumpman logo. They sell the exact same shoe without the logo at some low-end stores, Ross, Walmart, etc. The reason you don't go purchase them there is because you pay for the logo. So do I think Adidas can rebound? Yes. Do I think Kanye West can rebound? Yes. However, I don't think people purchased the shoe because people weren't purchasing the shoe, again, because it was an Adidas. People were purchasing the shoe when he was with Nike. People went and bought the shoe because he was at Nike. Then he went to Adidas. And that's when folks stopped buying, they started buying it from Adidas. So I think if somebody rolled the dice, another company, Puma, Reebok, etc., picked it up, I think then their sales will profit as well.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question for you, Attorney Shannon. My thought is this. So, when he supported Donald Trump, it was controversial. When he quote unquote said slavery is a choice, I don't think he said it exactly that way, but he said quote unquote said slavery is a choice. It was controversial. People hated him for it. When he, it's a list of things that he did that could be controversial throughout the entire business relationship. I mean, is it fair that they could just pick one thing and say, okay, well, this thing is actually over the edge, a tweet, and now I'm ready to give up? When you've had this relationship, he said controversial things. He's been controversial. He's been polarizing. It's helped build the company up. At least that part of the company up. Can you just all of a sudden, make that change?
So I don't think there's a legal answer for that, right? But I think there's call it public policy or even image answer to that question. And I think that people always have their own best interests at heart first, right? So yes, slavery might have been a choice, but if I was called never impacted by slavery, why would I care, right? If certain ways of life are more acceptable than others, then if it doesn't affect me, I don't care, right? It's only when people come down my street, they knock on my front door and say, "Hey, Mr. Boer, you can't park there," that I care. Dave Chappelle kind of has a stand-up comedy skit, but he talks about an exchange with Comedy Central, and he talks about how he was able to use the N-word on Comedy Central, right? And they never said anything to him. As soon as he started using a disparaging word for homosexuality, that's when the powers that be called him into the office and was like, "Hey, you can't say that." Well, they were all homosexuals, right? Or they lived a certain lifestyle. So in the event, I think, I think when it affects you personally, that's when you care the most, right? And I think at the end of the day, I think Adidas's bottom line would have been hurt much more farther. I think the economic benefit to dropping Ye after an anti-Semitic comment outweighs dropping Ye after saying slavery was a choice, if that makes sense, right? Because I think economically, I think you probably have more folk that subscribe to whether it be the culture, the religion, or a combination of both, of one over the other, right? So I think at the end of the day, it became an economic decision, right? If I live in Miami, I don't say all people that ride snow mobiles, should go to hell or whatever, simply because it doesn't affect folk in Miami. But if I say people that ride jet skis, now it's a little different because there's an economic benefit there, if that makes sense. So I think the impact, and I'm talking about a global, right? So I imagine Yeezys are sold where slavery never existed, if that makes sense, right? So I think the economic impact of that statement far more outweighs one demographic versus the other, which is why I think they made the decision to do what they did.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually going to throw that back to the audience. Do you think that Yeezy's alleged anti-Semitic comments would have had far more economic damage than the alleged anti-black comments or just supporting the Republicans and supporting Trump and his conservative values. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the audience. I want to turn the attention to Attorney Bonza. So, Attorney Bonza, you're from Congo, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you came here to America. Um, I'm assuming because of his values. Is that correct?
I would say yes. Hmm.
Okay, and you're a businessman, and you have a family here, and how does it? You know, do you think that this is setting a dangerous precedent for people in the business space where you can make a personal comment, and now that because a certain group of people don't like it, I can now terminate the business deal. So before you answer that, I'm actually gonna get to the comment, but I want you to think about that for you. Someone said James Kim said he made a threat that they couldn't drop him. Yeah, so he made a threat on the podcast they couldn't drop him, but I mean, you know, I don't know if that's considered disparaging. And Dwayne Camper said that's real interesting. Meanwhile, companies have had BDM toys, blackface clothing, etc. But all that was fine upon release. But them Jews run the media is anti-Semitic? Question mark. So the whole "I'll kill the Nexus, I'll flack you'll be" that wasn't a droppable offense. Like I don't remember Kanye saying that, but I guess it wasn't. And then he said, Wayne Cameron said, "Fair point." So go ahead, Attorney Bonds. Do you think this is setting a dangerous precedent for America?
Um, it's it's a yes or no. It depends on how you look at it. Um, Taking it from the positive perspective, right? Um, it's setting you rather in better position, good direction, because any form of hatred is not tolerable, you know. Um, and us as an institution, we have to do more to encourage or discourage actions that can make certain people feel uncomfortable or demean uh, another one or another group of people. I'll go back to the Starbucks. Uh, Big statements. Um, I believe in 2021, when the manager treated a color or black customer a certain way, and Starbucks CEO took on the day to teach cultural sensitivity by offering some kind of either day off or something like that. I don't recall, but they took a major step to say that we do not condone these type of action. The doors open, Starbucks is open for everyone, right? Um, and and I want to still try to speak to the plus these type of actions have, right? Um, and we know very well that Kanye is an adult. He's educated, and he knows what not to say or what not to say, at least in public. Just because a little guy can say something and get away with it, it doesn't mean that Barack can say the same thing and then sit quiet and then doesn't see Twitter go off red and stuff like that. That's that. Actions like this are setting a good path in cultural sensitivity and tolerance of one another and discouraging hatred and stuff. However, to Mary Kemper's point, or to what Sharon just alluded earlier, and to many of our commentators, um, you see that the same type of actions or words or rhetorics used against a certain category of people, whether it be Latino, Black, it doesn't take much uh, impact on a nation. And the reason is why? Because there's a lot at stake. It depends on who are your enemies, right? It depends on who can make a phone call and say, hey, I need to make a statement. I need that guy down. Interest. If you don't do that, I will do this. Pretty much the same thing. I call a mayor. Listen, last year I donated $20,000 to your campaign, and you up and running again. That guy made that. You need to come up there and make a statement to condemn that. It happened. So we don't know what happened behind the door that Addias had to feel, because that's what his interest. You hurt people where they hurt. You hit people where they hurt the most. And Yeezy or Addias deal is where he would have hurt the most. And that's why they hit him there. People made phone calls, certainly. People requested that certain people do certain actions to make a statement. And folks with influence, money wise, are the ones that made phone calls. And so, to answer your question short, yes, I think it's setting an example in the right direction. It doesn't mean that those other negative rhetorics that have been overlooked are okay. They're not okay, but it depends on the circumstances. My friend Tanil will love that.
Okay.
Uh,
So I got a hypothetical question for you, Attorney Bonds, and then I can let the rest of the guests answer. Let's flip it. Let's say the Adidas CEO said, slavery was a choice, or uh, black people are lazy. He tweeted this out. The Adidas CEO and Ye said, uh, "Hey, I want to end my relationship with Adidas because I feel like they go against my values, and I want to end this license agreement." Do you think that Ye has legal right to end the contract because of anti-black comments that was made by Adidas CEO?
yes and no. Yes, because there are broad provisions in contract that can be interpreted one way or the other. That's where we're knocking on the door of the court for the judge to come in and then rule on whether they breach. I can walk away with this. For example, do not make any disparaging comments about the organization or anything one way or the other. We are all for support of every race. We do not condone race. We do not condone racism and stuff like that. You can interpret that provision in a contract to use it against the CEO in that circumstance and walk away, right? So will this situation have the same impact? Maybe yes. It all depends on who rally behind it, how big of an impact it makes, and things like that. He can step down. They can just so yeah. So, but
Okay.
if the contract is clear as to what can be interpreted as action for withdrawal, then it'd be difficult. But it's just vague in general. The year could have come out in a situation if the CEO had to say something like that. But I wish a CEO would say something like that. I think he would just step down real quick.
Okay. All right. Attorney Claus, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what Chief said, and I think it simply just boils down to the language, right? If there's a non-disparaging clause, usually that clause is twofold. It works for both the draftor and the draftee. So I think in the event, the CEO said something of the what you're referring to, Justin, I think then Kanye West would be in a position to say, you know what, this company is not what I stand for. Therefore, I no longer want to do dealings with this company. And again, I'll bring up the Dave Chappelle scenario, right? That's why he left Comedy Central, right? Because he was like, look, you all will let me say whatever I want to say as long as it doesn't offend you. Now that you all want me to stop saying what offends you, I can't work here anymore, right? So people thought Dave Chappelle was crazy. He walked away from all that money, left Comedy Central, canceled the Chappelle show. Well, in the end, it was because he felt they were trying to take the company in a direction he didn't agree with, right? So I think as long as the language is in there, then I think it works for both the draftor and the draftee. And at least here in Indiana, if a contract is considered ambiguous, then it's construed against the drafter. So that means, the drafter in and of itself knew what they put in there. They should have had the wherewithal to include any and everything within the four corners of the document. So therefore, it's up to them to show that this is not what they meant, and to keep it simple. But I truly believe that if the CEO made those type of comments, then I think Kanye West would have left.
Okay.
But real quick, Dwayne, that was part of it. That was part of it. But there was also a part that where they wanted him to take the show in a direction he didn't want to take. And I want to say it also involved him in drag, and he didn't want to do that either. But that was part of it, though, Dwayne. But there's more to the story. And we could talk offline if you would like.
Okay, yeah. So Dwayne said Chappelle didn't leave because of that. He left because they didn't pay him the $500 that he was due. They tried to pay him a tenth of that. But you're saying that was all a part of it, Attorney Buari, for clarification. Right. Okay, Attorney Whitley, what are your thoughts? If the shoe is on the other foot, EA wants to leave, and Adidas because of something that a CEO said offline, do you think EA has the rights to end his license agreement?
Yes, I agree with everyone else. If those comments, because it's not Kanye personally that's entering into these contracts; it's his company, right? Mascot Entertainment or whatever that company is, right? So, just like Adidas, if that statement from Adidas CEO violates his company's core values, then he should. And again, that disparaging clause is in there. That he should have grounds to terminate the contract based on that. It's simple as that.
Okay.
He's a business as well. As long as his core values are listed, the contract has that disparaging clause. I don't see why he couldn't avail himself to it.
Okay. So Dwayne also said the anti-Semitic comments got more attention and response due to the anti-Black comments being par for the course, expected and encouraged in this society, whereas those that have created that societal blueprint are the ones that have the power to enforce consequences on those that are anti them. Interesting. Those tropes are okay if there is no consequence. LOL. Mary Camper said he should have that right. They had an interchangeable image. Each image affects each other. Mary Camper also said they had their own personal image outside of each other. So, so I guess everybody's landing on the fact that they think that he would have had this, right? I do find it interesting. Now, I find it interesting for a lot of different reasons because I think, and if I'm not mistaken, Ye made it open that he wanted to end his relationship with Adidas, but he couldn't because he was bound by these contracts. We know in business our world that contract is the law of the land. It's foundational, right? It's one thing that there might be default rules in the business law, but the court is going to tend to go with whatever the contract says, whatever you guys agree to. Now, there's exceptions to every rule, but in general, the courts are going to go towards whatever the contract says. And Adidas, in their statement to the public, never cited any that he violated the contract, that he said disparaging marks against the company. They never said all that, right? They only said that his comments were considered intolerable, hateful, X, Y, and Z, which a lot of his comments could be considered that, right? So I think that I'm not sure if Ye wants to go down this route, but I think that he has standing to say that they really don't have a right to violate the contract. Now, nobody has the contract. I don't believe the contract was made public. I tried looking for it, but you know, so it really depends on the contract. But disparaging clauses are typically used against the company, right? You can't make disparaging comments against the company that you're doing business with, okay? Or if the deal goes sour or whatever, you can't make disparaging comments against the company once you end this deal, right? So I've never heard it where you can't make disparaging comments about someone else, and because you made disparaging comments about someone else, that may or may not affect your business, that now all of a sudden you can use that clause to say that you violated the contract. And then also, uh, you know, I think we really haven't even got into discussion on what is truly disparaging, right? And what his comments truly are, they really are disparaging, right? And that's all up to interpretation. So, I mean, Attorney Buhari, I'm gonna throw this back at you. Do you think Kanye had a leg to stand on if he wanted to fight this legally?
So again, I think without reviewing the contract, it would be hard to say.
Right.
But I would imagine that there's language in the agreement that says you can't bring any, call it, undue scrutiny, something of that nature, bad publicity, bad press, something like that to the company. And again, I think in the event these comments, which I think they do, give rise to those type of actions, then I think the company is in the right, and uh, they'd have the right to terminate the contract. I think also, again, I think the question becomes outside of the legal spectrum, right? I think it becomes a public policy spectrum, right? If Kanye West does decide to sue, which judge will pick this up and want that unwanted scrutiny, right? So who will pick this up and actually rule against to say, you know what, Kanye should still be with Addias? So I think I think sometimes we look just too much at the legal angle, legal perspective, and don't think about it all in all. And the only reason why I say that is I had a case here that centered around uh, freedom of religion and the freedom of assembly pursuant to con law. No judge here wanted it, right? And I wasn't even going to say it was a slam dunk, but nobody wanted to be a judge to tell a pastor whether or not he could or could not worship with his congregation. Like they tend to be, those lines that judges don't want to cross, right? So even if Kanye West sues and says, you know what, no, I have standing, they terminated me, they terminated the contract, they breached the contract, etc. But what judge is going to say, yes, you can make these type of remarks, and the company still has to keep you and not terminate the contract, right? So I think there's that part of it too as well.
All right. To add to what Attorney Buhari said, it now boils down to how much money you want to spend in litigation, not to necessarily recover something, but to make a point. You know, Um here it might not necessarily revive the contract based on a lot of ground, but he can still pursue it in court to make a point because facts are facts. Your contract should have included this. A judge can look at it like that, but it didn't. Although this that he said is really despicable to a point, but it doesn't rise to uh, a, a point where his economic interest with Adidas should be severed. And then you go in and around the theories of influencer or behind the scene influencer. he can make those inquiries in discovery to show to the court that this was really not about a contract, it was really about something else. So then the case shifts the momentum or direction and goes into a completely different direction just to get the point made like, hey, I did it, I'm wrong, but it does not really affect my contract with so and so company. Now, the company may still prevail on public policy, like Attorney Buhari said. However, um, on the contract, the interpretation, as you say, Attorney Kemper, may not necessarily yield much to Addias. So he got money more than $2 billion. 2 billion. I mean, I guess in bank, he can do it. He can spend it. It's read Judge Cardozo cases. You'll see where it's somewhat. Yeah, he has a leg to stand on. I'll say, yeah. But if you allow me to introduce one little nuance too, and when folks say that a lot of things have been said about blacks, let me put it that way, and they seem to get away with it. But in this one particular, is said is intercepted, and then it gets a different impact. I guess my question becomes, how have blacks portray themselves or carry themselves vis-a-vis comments that have been said against themselves, right? And how over the course have that changed? Are they seeming to accept that and live with it? Or they still know this is a no, it cannot go forward, right? Because I can tell you how many journalists have lost their job on CNN for having accidentally let out a word, of that. And culturally, it shows you how this culture is very serious about non-tolerance of that type of conduct used against them. They unite, move forward, they put all things together, and move forward. But then on the other end, we see a divide between the blacks. I give you an example, which is very controversial. Monique, which is very talented individual, Steve Harvey, Tyler Perry, and everybody else. They already had a issue. Monique didn't agree with certain things, the way they were doing certain things with, I guess, the industry. But then his folks seemed to distance themselves from her, and then she found herself a corner, But it looks like initially, and I'm vaguely saying it looks like initially she did not get the support of her own people. It had nothing to do with comments being made, but it had something to do with how do you portray me as an actor? How do you respond to me as an actor versus other actors? Why do I have to do this? It boils down to what Dave Chappelle had with the other organization. You want to have a double standard treatment of me when I say this, or when it comes to certain role, versus when I do say things that do not bother you. So I believe at some point Monique was fed up with that. You cannot be, this contract cannot be this way. And I'm just trying to say that the bottom line is the seriousness of this also reflect on how serious is this culture about things said against them in that manner, and how maybe lax we are when it comes to certain things said to us in our face in a certain way.
Yeah, I think you got a good point. I mean, I think that you know it does show in a certain to a certain extent. Well, if black people aren't upset about it enough to stop supporting a particular brand or company, uh, why should the company head be concerned about it? But if the Jewish community is concerned enough to be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to stop supporting you. I'm going to stop doing business with you," then the company here should be concerned about it because the Jewish community is concerned about it. I think that's a fair point. I want to get to some comments here. It says, "Can y'all think of any?" Dwayne said, "Can y'all think of any prominent black celebrity that has withdrawn from a company contract due to the company's support or behaviors?" Hell, Shaq went into one right after they found the CEO to be a SWS. I'm not sure what an SWS is, so you can explain that. He said, "Correct me if I'm wrong, but as a controlling entity or the paying entity, they usually don't put that in the contract. Hey, if you don't like what we do, you can terminate with us without issue or cause."
So I'll address that last comment, and that's simply why it makes sense to have a good attorney, right? Because if you have a good attorney read the agreement, your attorney should bring it to light to say, look, this is one-sided. And then they'll say, what does that mean? Well, I can say whatever the heck I want to about Jacoby and he can't breach or terminate the agreement, but then Kobe can't say anything about the company. So the ones I do, the ones I draft, they usually work both for the drafter and the draftee, right? So I think, Dwayne, that's where to be good just to get, have somebody review the agreement, have somebody review the document, just so you know and understand what is actually in the document. And I have no problem, pulling a document up in Word, redlining, and sending it back to the person, letting their counsel review, and then you just go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a very great point. Definitely hiring a right attorney helps a lot. Suspected white supremacist with SWS. I'm not sure which deal you're talking about. If you're talking about Papa John, I don't think he was a white supremacist. But I want to take it to Jacoby.
Well,
Jacoby.
one second.
Okay, no problem.
To answer Dwayne, I don't know if this he was not necessarily a black owner, but the owner of Los Angeles Clippers. Based on the contract they had, based on the organization overall view of support, they forced him to sell the team to another individual. So I don't know if that
Well,
helped.
see, that's a good point. Maybe we could talk about that in more detail. I don't know if they forced, but maybe public opinion forced them, but not necessarily from a legal standpoint. I think
Public opinion wouldn't make him budge because he wanted to keep his team. It's the organization that.
But I think eventually the pressure of everybody saying you need to quit, you need to sell. That's what it wasn't from a legal standpoint. It wasn't because he had to give up his company, right? He had to sell. I don't think it was from a legal standpoint.
No. The NBA commissioner had alluded to some of their policies that has to do with racial discrimination and things like that, or prejudice. And I think it was based on those provisions that I don't know. I'm just
but of course, okay, they can quote some provisions, but did anything happen to him from the NBA? No, he eventually sold his ownership. So I think it was public opinion, but we can go more into detail because I don't know all the facts. We can maybe talk about that another time. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. Now, Attorney Willie, just to kind of wrap this thing up a little bit, you are former brand owner, technically still a brand owner. What are some lessons that business owners can take from this deal, especially people who are in your industry, clothing industry? What are some lessons, some big legal lessons that they can take from this to make sure that they don't end up in a similar situation as Addias or as Yang?
One, they need to retain an attorney so that when situations come up, contracts come into office, they can call and say, "Hey, I just got this contract. Let me email it over to you. We already got money in the retainer. Let me know when you can work this in the workflow and get back to me." Simple as that. That right there, and budgeting to put that in your business would save a lot of people so much time and would allow them access to so much education and resources. Period. 2, when it comes to contracts, contracts are hyper-technical. You gave an example of how Kanye could fight in battle the termination of the contract, while other people said that it would be futile, that it makes sense. So if lawyers disagree and have different minds, how can you expect a layperson to understand all the ramifications and nuances of that contract? So if you are a business owner, at a minimum, right now, this weekend, between now and the new year, the contracts in your office, read them. Right? I was had a conversation with the property manager of the building where my office is. Right? She said there's a lot of attorneys in the building. She says a lot of people don't know our building has a dress code, but it's in the contract. Even attorneys in the office don't read it. Right? So we go through, and that's the whole thing. Like, as people, and especially as lay people, we go through the world listening to people, going with the flow, things like that. And we don't really take the time to read things through, right? And really know what we're dealing with and the parameters of such. So first, if you're concerned about these issues and you're in a venture deal, read your contract over this weekend, over this holiday break, and see, is there a clause not in your contract that you would want in your contract, right? And then use this time and this information and this experience from Kanye to review your contracts, get familiar with them, and then you heard terms like this: free game from Attorney Pawari, a disparagement clause. Make sure that if that resonates with you, make sure you got one. So that's right. Instant free game that you can apply right now as a business owner. Also, we discussed if you're a small brand, right? We discussed how sometimes partnering with a large company will allow you more distribution, more access to a bigger market, but know that in those relationships, your behavior might be accountable. So don't go into these relationships, these contractual relationships, or be a business owner and not move as if my behavior outside of my business is not a reflection of my business. And my business will never suffer from my actions. A good case in point of that disbelief, that delusion, I think is another Icarus, Mr. Trump. I think Mr. Trump his brand was based on, I'm gonna say whatever I want to say, right? No one can rein me in, but that's good until a point. There's a limit for everything. And I think he's run his limit to that, where now his situations are being detrimental to his brand, let's say that in the least. And so again, let all of these figures, you got Weinstein. Look around, people. You let these gigantic figureheads, businesses, people that were considered untouchable, have behavior issues outside of their business, crumble their business empire, or they end up in jail. Right? So to be under the delusion as a business owner, right? As Jay once said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. People quote that all the time, but have no idea what that means, right? It's that you have to, if you watch this movie called The Prestige, right? It's a movie, one of the magicians, it's an Asian guy, right? And he did this thing with a bowl, this trick with a bowl. And to pull the trick off, he had to have the bowl in between his legs. But to never reveal that that was the case, he always walked bow-legged. So people would never be suspicious of his stance because he always played the part. This is also why people go crazy, because if the part that you playing ain't your authentic self, but that's to get into a mental health discussion. But anyway, but you got to realize that when you do this entrepreneur thing, your brand is always facing the public and you are your brand. You are always facing the public. And any of your behavior can come back and have a detrimental effect on your business. But practical things. Those clauses, check your contracts, make sure you got those clauses, make sure you got attorneys on your team to review contracts and talk the contracts with you. And I will drop this in. Communities. I know people tiptoe around it as far as the Anti-Defamation League, right? What I challenge marginalized cultures to do is use the Anti-Defamation League as a blueprint, as an example. They file lawsuits. Read them. See what those cases are. See what their legal arguments are to champion for people in their culture, in their ethnicity, their religion that they feel have been wrong. They have been defamed. They have been harmed by some type of hate crime. See how they attack. And we notice that that agency or that group is super successful, right? Success leaves clues. Use it as a blueprint to protect your interest, right? So that's something else that I think that we can take away from these situations. I don't know. I see my name in the comment that I'm improving a point regarding the threshold with whites. I would love for you to expound on that.
So I think what he's saying there is he said something a bit earlier about what happens when blacks say stuff about these white-owned companies, and then I think you said something about how Trump was able to get away with saying whatever he wanted to say, and there really not be any scrutiny for him
until now. What I'm saying is that hammer's always hanging.
Right.
Right now, yes, there are people society-wise that may get a longer rope, right? But the pendulum always swings. And at some point, you're going to lose momentum, and it's going to swing back in the other direction. And can you deal with that? But I agree, though. The length of the rope is not the same for everybody, right? So if you are in a marginalized class, again, that hypervigilance of how my brand looks to the public, unfortunately, is more of a concern for some people in society versus other members of society. That's a fact. Society ain't equal. We know that.
Sure.
Right? But how long are we going to complain about that and when we going to start making moves about it? Right? It's one thing to keep saying that the house is on fire, but when you don't get out some water,
right,
or get out, or whatever. Like, I understand, and I'm not saying that we should ignore societal ills. What I'm saying, if we recognize them and we know we're about to get hit, let's just try something. Let's try what we got to lose. Let's try a spin move. Let's try.
So, I think the difference here, though, is, and there's an underlying factor that I think is, call it the elephant in the room, but is yet to be discussed, is ownership, right? I think that's the underlying factor. Who owns what, right? So if I'm Adidas, I own you, Kanye. You don't own me. But I own Adidas because I own Adidas, right? So I think that's where I kind of... So Dwayne, it's the second comment Dwayne makes. It's up in his second comment when he says, interesting how business is affected when the business head is black versus white, right? The behavior threshold is way lower for the toleration of blacks versus whites, agree. So I think that's the comment he's referring to. But Kobe, I'm a businessman, not a businessman statement says a lot, right? Because then when you own, I think it puts you in the positions to not be canceled, right? I can't cancel something that I own, right? Jay said to the Super Bowl, I need you. You don't need me, right? I don't need to do the halftime show because I know my worth. I walked away from, millions. Same with Prince. You think he wanted his man? When I own my masters, you're a slave until you own your own, right? That was what slavery was. Slavery was people owning other people. Once those freed individuals became free, they were no longer bound by the oppressor. So could we get into details about how they changed the game and laws? Sure. But I think that the key piece here that we're missing is ownership and the lack of ownership in our communities, right? I, as call it Mr. Trump, can say whatever I want to say. And will there be repercussions? Sure. But my name is still on the building, right? I still got the golf course. And then for a certain subset of people that like my rhetoric, they're going to make sure I stay in business, right? And those are usually people that have the type of money that I have, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So I think the biggest piece here, I think that we tend to ownership is huge, right? Black ownership is huge, right? Justin, you work for yourself. Chief, you work for yourself. Kobe, you work for yourself. You can say whatever you want. Who's going to terminate you? Now, you might lose clients, but you don't lose your source of income because you own the firms you work in, right? So I think that's the piece that I would encourage is that ownership piece, right? And again, that's that when you see a Jay, Robert Smith, some of these individuals that own Byron Allen, right? You know, when you see I went and bought the programs that they failed to put us on, right? They own the programs, the BTs, the Viacoms, and they're painting us in these bad lights. So I went and bought stations to make sure they can shine good light. Tyler Perry, right? They wouldn't let me do the Addias and the Warner Brothers and the Foxes, and so I started Tyler Perry Studio. And not only that, I'm giving other folk opportunity. So your David Manns, your Tamala Manns, they were background singers for Kirk Franklin. Now they're actors, right? And he cast them in almost all of their movies. Spike Lee did the same thing. Some of the folk who Spike Lee put on, or people we look at. I mean, Denzel got his break because of Spike. My man's that played Gus in Breaking Bad got his break because of Spike, right? So it's like, yes, you can. Ownership is key, right? And I agree. Dame Dash cannot be fired, but people can choose not to do ventures with, and that's true. But again, I think the more people that are in positions that take a stance with Dame Dash and they understand where Dame Dash is coming from, they tend to do business with Dame Dash. But he can't be fired. But Dame Dash also is not relying on anybody to pay him either, right? So that's what I mean. So Dame Dash, yes, he can say whatever he wants. He still has his brand. He's still going to have those individuals that subscribe to what he's saying, and that's going to help him stay afloat, right? What Dame Dash doesn't have to worry about is an Addias cutting ties with him, right? It's a Balenciaga cutting ties with him because they're basically saying, walk this line or we're going to get rid of it. So I think that's the elephant in the room that has yet to be addressed, and that's that ownership piece. I think the more we tend to own, the less folk can, and I liken it to homeowning versus renting. You can be on time as much as you want with your rent, but if I decide to sell my property to a different landlord and they choose not to honor the lease, guess what? You got to go. It's not the same for home ownership, right? So that's just, I think the ownership piece is the piece that is huge. And I think the more we position ourselves to actually be owners of companies, the less we're on the more rope we can have too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of Shannon, I don't know how much time we got, Justin, but I just want to say I think that's why we're here, right? I think we've all settled into the type of law that we practice. We participate in this podcast is to encourage people to be owners, to adopt that ownership mentality, to help put them in different positions to control their narrative, to control their lives, to control their legacy.
And to add to that, it's also, and then this is a compliment to the podcast. It tells you at least how business can drive major decisions, right? I can say that on an ownership perspective, but also on a consumer perspective, right? And then we as people who cannot drive are unable or have been unable to drive that because of the divide amongst us. You know, there are major companies whose main customers that buy things every day are blacks, and those are designers, you know, that make money off of blacks. And but in amongst us, if we were to say like today we stand together, we no longer go to going to buy that product, some of us won't agree with us, you know, based on something. And I go back to Kanye West. Trump invited him to a meeting where there was a notoriously known racist of, you know, of European descent. He was at the meeting. Kanye was aware of that, but he never said that. He never made any statement about it. He went and spoken about, as if it was okay. What was the intent of him to bring the two folks together in a meeting when they know they are very divided when it comes to certain things? But then he supported him and continued to support him. It's only later that these politicians have known about it. They want to politicize it, and they're making another. It was dead wrong for inviting the two men to that same meeting. But himself, Kanye, didn't see no problem with it. But I will say, no, you should have seen a problem with it, because this is a notoriously known racist. He doesn't see you, he only sees himself. So things like that, so long as us as a nation will be divided or torn apart, succumbing to the very old weapon used, divide to conquer, we never probably will be able to drive the business and control the business and control major decision as it done, because as some author wrote down, we have 4 layers of blacks: the one that are in the mainstream, the Obamas, and then the one that are at the lower end, and the middle class uprising one, and then it's difficult. It's very difficult. So to Shannon, ownership, but also consumerism as well, and unity, then things can be done. Was that supposed to be my closing statement, or no?
It wasn't, but hey, we gotta let my elbow flow. No, but
Okay, just look at you. I'll wait till the end there to see what closing. You know what I'm saying?
But no, yeah, you guys said a lot there. I do want to spend your time, but it's funny when you were talking, Attorney Bonza, the viewership went up. So I don't know what you were saying that was resonating with people, but good shout out to you. But a lot of comments were made. I just want to go back to some of the comments that were missed. Dwayne said he agrees with Attorney Claus. Mary says, do we believe that blacks are not disappointed in these statements? Or is it just that others believe the same things that he's spoken, so the topic look not as serious? Yeah, I think that's a very, very important question. I think that something that we really got to look into as black people. Dwayne said those players refusing to play and making the team darn near worthless. Better to sell, take the hit, get the money on the way out the door. So you saying that I forgot his name, but the owner of the Clippers, that was his. It was a business decision for him because of public opinion. And then he said Cody Whitley is proving my earlier point regarding the threshold for blacks. Dwayne also said, yes, Claus got what I was saying. I was literally getting ready to say the rope is longer. LOL, great mind. Hashtag great minds. Velma Camper said, was this similar to Al Green and Prince the singer, etc.? You can't hurt a black man who has nothing to lose. I support an independent thinking black man. Thank you, Velma Camper, for your comment. And this is why I also support independent thinking black man. Dame Dash said, I'm sorry, Dwayne Campbell said, Dame Dash can't be fired, but people can choose not to do ventures with him. It's introspective. I just had a thought on what Shannon said, and I'll let you guys give your closing remarks. You talk about ownership, but to be honest, Kanye did have some level of ownership, right? He owned his business and he owned the trademarks, right? And so I think ownership has layers to it, right? Because you can own something, but you cannot own the brand. You cannot own your name. You cannot own your slogans and your products. So that's why it's so important to make sure you're talking with the business attorney too, because you need to make sure your intellectual property is protected and can be licensed out. When you do license deals, you got to make sure that you have language in those contracts that protects your brand. A lot of times people don't know that when you have a trademark or you have your intellectual property registered with a copyright or a patent or whatever it is, you can license that, right? And we're talking about a licensing deal. You can make money off. You can have other people make money off your particular brand, right? So that's why it's important to make sure your intellectual property is protected. Um, so I go to Attorney Shannon, and I know we got to get our closing remarks a little bit over, but it's okay. Go ahead.
But no, so and I think again, I agree with that, right? So I think that ownership is a multifaceted approach. It's not just a business; it's all aspects regarding the business, right? So in order to own the business, you have to understand the business, right? How do businesses operate? It does me no good if I just call it the brick and mortar, and somebody else owns everything else on the inside, right? I need to own not only the brick and mortar, but like you said, the IP, right? And then I need to understand: can I license this? Can I not? One of my most, and I think people understand, and they said, Pat Riley trademarked the phrase three-peat, right? Pat Riley, but it was genius. So every time the Bulls won back to back, or they, 3 championships in a row, and the Lakers did it, bro, they had to pay Pat Riley to use that term, to put it on the shirts, right? The Chicago Bulls champion is three-peat. Pat Riley owned it. Genius. So, I mean, again, that goes to the ownership aspect. And it's like, I tell people all the time, again, when you get into these agreements, have it reviewed by an attorney just so you know what you may be giving up. For example, professors, when they find, if let's say I'm a chemical or a scientific professor at a university and I discover some profound whatever, 90% of these agreements say that is property of the university, right? How do I make that mine, right? Because here I am, I just robust research, this ingenious, forth thinking, the next wave of whatever, my $1 billion idea, but now you're telling me I came up with it, and now the university owns it, right? And again, people don't understand it because they get into these contracts, they don't read. When I publish as a professor, who owns the rights to that book, right? That's why it's important to have these conversations with your legal counsel. And I say all the time, I'm cheaper in the beginning than I am on the back end, right? Just because if I have to help you go down that litigation route, because now we're fighting over who owns what and who doesn't own it, that gets very, 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 very costly very quickly. But again, ownership to me is not just being of your own. It's understanding how all of the pieces come together, right? So yes, Addias may own the patent, but I own the name. I own the trademark. So you can keep the design, right? Because it's me that sold the shoe, not the other way around. Like the man makes the clothes, clothes never make the man, right? So again, I think that's huge, right? I mean, that's why Apple does. I mean, I know we're talking, I was going to say apples and oranges, no pun intended, but they own all the patents, the trademarks, just because, and they license them out. But it's that piece too. So again, it's very, 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 very important that you have somebody in your pocket, somebody in your corner that you can say, look this over and let me know what I could be potentially giving up, right? If I go to work at an RV company and I'm an engineer and I come up with the latest, greatest new lithium battery that can, do let's say the average mileage on the lithium battery right now is 300 miles and I can quadruple that. Who owns that property? Is it the company? Is it me? Is it a 50-50 split? Like, what does that look like? So I think ownership is more than just owning the business. It's also understanding, like you alluded to, Justin, what all do I own, right? Again, trade secrets, trademarks, copyrights, right? If I come up with something and again, on that licensing piece, you can't license something you don't own, right? So before you can license it, you have to own it. So before we can talk about whether you can pay me or not for my slogan or just do it or this, that, or the other, I have to own it. If I don't, there is no licensing agreement if I don't own it.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, it's a lot to think about. And I think Kanye, well, part of the reasons why I think that he wanted to end this relationship was because he wanted to own the manufacturing, right? He wanted to be able to do it on his own time, his own way, and not have these other companies make money off of his manufacturing. And so now he gets to make his own, to manufacture his own products, right? And so, there's so many different layers to ownership. But I don't want to downplay collaboration, right? Collaborations are important, and it just all comes down to knowing who you're collaborating with, number one. And Adidas knew when they did a relationship with Ye who Ye was. Okay, it's not like they went in this, eyes closed, right? They knew who he was, and then also knowing what those like having those clauses in place when things go bad, right? And so that's why it's so important. You can collaborate with anybody, right? You can make a deal, quote unquote, with the devil, right? But what is that? What is that deal? What is it saying? So, um, Attorney Bonza, any last minute remarks you want to give to our audience just about what business owners what they can learn from this Ye and Addias termination bill?
Um,
1
perception.
minute, 30 seconds. Sir.
30 seconds. 59. What about 59? 59 seconds.
25 now. You wasting time.
So perception is everything. You just have to find a way to work on how we carry ourselves as a business owner. And part of it is procedure and policy in how to manage our employees and what they have to say and what they have not to say. And going forward, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So knowledge is very key to business. Attorney Jacoby indicated earlier, if you have any questions, reach out, ask questions, you get answers. Learn, don't feel embarrassed to copy good habits. Seek, associate yourself with people that know more than you do know. Then you learn from them and share what you know that they didn't know either. So knowledge is very key and strive, follow the dream, be passionate about it, work harder next year than you work this year because the work you put in gets a result if you do it the right way as a business, and again, the pilot or the very critical point in the business is legal aspect also. Know how to combine new business nuances with the legal nuances because they work together. Other than that, Merry Christmas to every one of us. And it was a long year. Many things have happened, and stay positive going into the next year. Uh, uh, Work hard, as I said, and love the ones you have, and cherish the memories for things that you cannot change or things that you only have in the past. And hope that God will uplift and reveal himself in a different manners and way in positive ways this year to bring smile to those who couldn't smile last year or this year. Well, I love you guys. That was
Hey, 30 seconds.
9 seconds. I apologize.
All right. Attorney Bonza went to Minister Bonza, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. The campers came through strong today. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who listened in, and please send us your topics, your comments. Actually, next year we plan on doing more podcasts more often. So give us stuff to talk about so that we can talk about things that you're interested in if you're a small business owner. But thank you everybody for listening. My name is Attorney Justin Camper. We have Attorney Jacoby Whitley, Attorney Shannon Claus, but also known as Attorney Shannon Buari, and we have Attorney Mayombo Bonza from Bonza Law. So thank everybody for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please DM me. Put it in the comments below. And otherwise, we have another comment. Great talk from Delano Scape. Thanks for listening, Delano Scape. Otherwise, keep your business in
Your
order.
business.
Take care of your business. Happy holidays and stay legal. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one.
Peace.
Bye.
Merry Christmas. All the holidays, all of them. Yeah.